Aloha, friends. This season of the Voyagers podcast is brought to you by our friend Jonathan Udis, realtor and real estate advisor at Maui Dream Properties. Have you got Maui on your mind? I've been living here for 4 years, and I've heard that island fever is a thing, but frankly, I wake up every day and I feel like I'm in a dream. It's a wonderful place to call home, to raise a family, to build community, or just to visit. If you share this dream, you'll want to go to MauiDreamProperties.com and drop Jonathan a note of hello. Whether buying or selling or investing, Jonathan will help you navigate the real estate market on Maui because, without exception, he serves his clients with passion, enthusiasm, and excellence. You can trust him to put you and your family's needs first. If you're thinking about moving to one of the most beautiful islands in the world, check out MauiDreamProperties.com and drop Jonathan a hello and get started on making your dream a reality. I'm David Glenn Taylor, and this is the Voyagers Podcast. This week's episode is quite specific. Over the last year, as I've been bringing you these stories, I've realized that it's been somewhat therapeutic for me. I found myself quite often sitting in the evening thinking about a conversation I had or reflecting with my wife, Maria, about what I've learned from a guest. Even if no one was listening to these, I think I found an incredible value in just making them for me. It keeps my ears open to all the amazing stories I hear. I get to pick topics I'm interested in, find people who know things, learn about it. How cool is that? And these days, here's what I'm most interested in: my kids. Maria and I have 3 sons. Andrew is 22 next month. Noah, he just turned 15 last week. And Micah, he's 11. They are all wonderful, but this episode isn't about them. It's about Maria and I. And those of you who are working in the parenting space, doing your best, trying to figure it out. And then also having those inevitable conversations about life after kids when they leave the nest and it's just you left. There's still a life to be lived, right? How do we do that? I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Tim and Mona Stuart. They are educators. They live in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, where Tim is the head of school at the International School of Addis Ababa. He spent his career in international education and has written several books, including Children at Promise, 9 Principles to Help Kids Thrive in an At-Risk World. I worked for Tim as a high school art teacher in Gallup, New Mexico for a few years. At that time, we were just beginning our parenting journey. And Tim and Mona, besides being neighbors, were real role models for Maria and I as we watched the way they parented their 3 kids. Today, we're focused on the lessons they've learned by raising those 3 amazing children and launching them all into adulthood. Successfully. Because we need advice. Maria and I are in the trenches. We're working at this parenting thing, and it's been a challenge, especially during the pandemic. And we can see the finish line now, too. And it's a bit scary. So Maria and I sat down with Tim and Mona on Zoom, and they let us grill them a bit about parenting while I took notes.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge how crazy it is that we're on the most isolated land on the planet in Hawaii, and you guys are in East Africa, and we're able to talk at all. How you been?
Doing really well. Loving our time here in Ethiopia. Super exhilarating and fun, and on all fronts. I think all of our senses are blowing up.
You seem like you guys are really, really enjoying it there. Like Tim, you know, I see all Mona's pictures of you and Mona's pictures of everything in Addis Ababa. I mean, I'm assuming you guys are slammed and busy, but you seem really at home there.
Yeah.
It's the best decision we've made in a long, long time. And
Wow.
made it deliberately for like all the right reasons, I think, but didn't understand how much it was going to bring us back to ourselves. You know, like I've said that for me, it's interesting because I was teaching in Germany and Tim was teaching in Turkey when we met. The Tim that I fell in love with in Turkey is most like the person who's living in Ethiopia, right? And but also there were glimmers of that in Rehoboth, in New Mexico. Because there's some similarities between those places, Eastern Turkey and here and New Mexico. There's some real similarities. So yeah, I just feel like we can be ourselves, which is really nice.
See, last time we saw you guys was at a soccer game in Seattle.
Was that pre-Hawaii?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
You know, it was funny because when we were thinking about you two, you know, we wanted to mostly just kind of catch up with you guys, but we were having a conversation about our kids who have traveled a lot now.
But the trick between making world citizens and really empathetic, aware kids that understand that their privilege means their responsibility versus just privileged kids. right? As you do a survey of the world, and that's my biggest curiosity, because I know you guys have probably come up against that with your travels and your different education.
Well, we should say there should be a footnote. Like we were talking this morning when we got up, and I said, "Hey, I really want to, somehow Tim and Mona managed to raise 3 kids who don't like hate them." She goes,
and I said,
well,
I don't know. Maybe they do.
Yeah, but she was like, "Well, we don't
know.
actually know. All we've seen is Facebook. So, like, do your kids like you?"
Our kids like us.
Yeah.
Yay! Great job, you guys.
Yeah, we have moments. Yeah. But
No,
they're short-lived. We're just, in the trenches of things. But
yeah, I mean, I think that is one of the things that I would say is probably one of our biggest accomplishments, is that we have a 26-year-old son and 2 23-year-old twins, and they love each other and we love them and they love us, and they talk to us about, everything, and much to our dismay sometimes.
Right.
Like we really don't want to know this.
I know.
All of it?
Don't know that trip to northern British Columbia. We don't want to hear about that.
Right.
But they keep talking to us, and I think but it did become a thing for us to actually say we're going to value the relationship with our kids more than our dogma and more than our beliefs.
Yeah.
We're not going to tread lightly with what we believe, and we're not going to kind of deny our faith and our belief systems and our values, but we're also in no way, shape, or form we're ever going to put those belief systems in front of the relationship with our kids. We just refuse to do that. And so I think that has, and interestingly enough, they're all on a journey, and so that's been a really fun thing to see.
Was there a moment where you were like, we have to shift?
I think Tyler was 4. I think Tyler was 4 years old.
Yeah, right. No, seriously.
No.
I don't know. I mean, I think what's really interesting is I think there's decisions all along the way, and I think you surprise yourself as parents about the things that you're willing to do, not because, I mean, at one point you may have thought things would be compromises, but they end up being really commitments to a kind of relationship that you're looking for. And I even realized at one point, like with Mariah, I don't know why I thought this, but we went to France one time, just she and I, and you have ideas about what those trips are going to be like too. Like you talked about traveling with your kids and what you're giving them, what it might look like or whatever. And it was just different. I mean, she was the 20-something, but she was just wanting to go to bed earlier than I thought we were going to, and wanted to stay in at night, and doesn't drink alcohol, and isn't like, there's just like France became, and I realized it's a feeling.
Yeah.
So what feeling do I want her to have when she thinks about being here with me?
Right.
What feeling am I leaving them with when we go in any place? Because so much of what's attached to being with you is what it feels like to be with you. I think also when your kids go through university, you go through university again. And it awakens a lot of the questions and ideas and the emotions and the pushback with people who represent something that you're trying to figure out yourself or refine. And so I think it's been refining for us, right? So it's not just a matter of like maintaining the relationship, it's a matter of being authentic and being honest and living as real people through it all. Do I want to keep having a real relationship with myself, or do I want to pretend that I'm fixed?
Right.
And that you're the one that needs to catch up to me or something. And so it's all, it's all that.
I was wondering what part worry plays in your parenting currently. I guess maybe as an energy, like, worry is a thing. My mom worries all the time. I'm 44 and she worries all the time. And when I talk to her, she said, well, it's every time, well, I was worried about the kids, or I was worried. And I'm always, where does that play in with you guys?
I think it's probably different for each of us.
Yeah. Worry has never really gotten me anywhere productive. So I don't worry too much about things, but I do think, so you can kind of put worry in the fear category, and, and you have to ask yourself, what are you afraid of? What are you actually afraid of? Okay, you're afraid that they're going to die in a motorcycle accident. You're afraid that they're going to OD, that you're afraid that they're going to get pregnant. You're afraid, what are the real fears?
Right.
Yeah.
And then you have to ask yourself, is that the kind of life that you want to live and you want your kids to live, or do you want to love them and love them through all of that? And I think, when the opposite of fear is actually love, right? And so you can either be afraid and worry, or you can love them and love them unconditionally through it all. And it's a heck of a lot more fun. And it actually has this law of attraction that I think our kids, because we have decided to love them, and love is a choice. We've decided to love them unconditionally. I do think that has an attractive nature where they keep coming back. They keep loving us back and choosing us.
Yeah, I think for me, I've watched other parents and I've watched worry. Well, one of the things I was concerned about is like, do I like care about my kids in a way and as a spiritual responsibility? Where do you take that excess? A lot of people take that into prayer and or too many phone calls or check-ins or whatever it is, whatever they do. And I just saw a lot of people even using things like prayer as what I call as a worry stone. It's like, I'm just going to hold on to this thing and I'm going to keep rubbing it because that somehow manages, it's my way of working out my worries. Right. And it just didn't seem right. And it didn't seem like a way that I wanted to spend my time. And I just decided that I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to make prayer into a worry stone. And I think the other breakthroughs that I've kind of had, because I have found times where it's like, for me, I feel that anxiety rising about things that I'm out of control, when I'm out of control or when there's so much distance between us, they're living their own lives somewhere else. And, what does that look like? And I think it was just coming back to the bedrock of free will, and just the birthright of that and the necessity of that. And just letting people work out their way. I think one of the big freeing things, it was funny, like when Tim started doing some of his doctoral research around what helps kids grow, and it really was the combination of difficulty, of pain and people in our lives, and realizing that the pain isn't the thing to avoid. I think that was a reset for me when they were very young. And just knowing that that's the only way that you grow, that's the only way that you get perseverance, that's the only way that character happens, and that we just have to keep leaning into that. So I think that took away a lot of my worry and shattered my illusions of kind of getting to a perfect, some sort of a perfect life, right?
You were talking about the worry stone. That's totally like what my mom does, right? It's prayer is when she said, well, I'm praying for you. It doesn't seem like anything ever gets fixed.
Resolved.
You
don't come out the other side transformed.
Yeah, there's no... It's a relatively unspiritual process. It seems for her. It's more of like an egoic exercise. Like that's a really helpful metaphor because we've gone on a similar track with our oldest because with Andrew, he's really challenged us in that same exact way of I have this fear. And he seems to stoke that fear. He talks to us.
The law of attraction.
He talks to us about everything. Wants to talk about everything, and I'm especially with me, and so we talk about everything. So I have to, I have a meditation practice that I have to bring it to, but it has to be a genuine like this. I own this stuff inside of me. I own this fear. I own this worry. I have to let this go for my own health because otherwise I'll just freak out because I've inherited my mom's approach, I guess. In that way, that my tendency would be to just have those things kind of spinning out of control in my head and have to find a worry stone. And
one of the interesting things that when the kids were in high school, there were times where I felt like I owned more of what I called units of concern. Mm-hmm. So it's like for each thing that's going on, there's kind of, let's say, a certain X number of units of concern about this thing. Mm-hmm. And it's like, is this my thing or is it their thing? If it's their thing, why do I own more units of concern about it
That's really
than they do?
I like that.
And that was my way of figuring out like whether I was taking on stuff that was really theirs or whether it was mine, and that's been helpful.
That's incredibly helpful. I do that with Andrew all the time with his health. I'm with his physical health and his sexual health and his emotional health. I'm far more vested in it, I feel like, than he is. And I have to step back because he's just doing his thing.
He's doing his thing.
Yeah.
Hey, Tim, do you think that Mona's approach to parenting has had more influence on your team parenting than yours has?
Like which person has been the more kind of influential, you think?
I think we're just making it up as we go, right? So we both are very, very different people, and I think I certainly have come Mona's way, but she's come my way as well. I mean, I think we are way better parents when we're together than when we're doing it solo. I don't know that I could say who's influenced who more, but I definitely know that we're better when we're doing it together. For sure.
Yeah. I would have parented very differently if Tim wasn't in my life, though.
So a question that's been on my mind lately, and so this is purely for my edification, is that while David and I have definitely had a different spiritual trajectory and where we don't follow some of the same things that we have in the past, trying to teach our children to walk in their spirit and in their wholeness, void from religion, because we're trying to partner with them on the path that each individual kid is on, which is, completely disparate from what their brother's doing or their other brother's doing. And so I find myself without the things to draw from my youth, right, that my parents taught me or my teachers taught me on how to protect yourself and to make choices that build yourself, build you up. So it might be like Noah with his girlfriend, or Micah with his friends, or Andrew with everything.
So because at the beginning you mentioned you have your beliefs and you talk about your beliefs, but that perhaps, and I don't know the stories of Tyler and everybody, Ian and Mariah, in terms of what spiritual kind of path they're taking. How do you parent them through your beliefs without pressing your beliefs on them?
Without that dogma, like you were talking about. How do you show them something maybe spiritual but not religious? It's more complicated.
Is that the parenting model that you had? So then it's like when you reach for something, those are the resources you feel like are there.
Yes.
And yet, it's not going to be something that they're receptive to.
Or helpful.
So,
yeah.
Right.
So what do you do?
How did you guys
How do you navigate that?
Yeah.
Well, Cain and Abel had to sleep with their sisters. So, that kind of throws all church morality right out the window, right from the get-go.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
So, if we're teaching them, biblical norms of sexuality, we're right. Genesis chapter 1. We're kind of fucked on that one, right? So I think that's kind of where it starts, right? And I think our kids have also been teaching us a lot about, first of all, about unconditional love, and the fact that, when it comes right down to it, the scripture that we call inerrant, never condemns slavery, and yet we would say that to be a Christian today, you should condemn slavery, although the Bible never does. The Bible, in fact, says that if you sell your daughter into sexual slavery, you should be able to buy her back at some point. Those are things that are kind of within Scripture. So I think that our understanding also of and kind of what we were taught in church is also being challenged day after day, and our kids are challenging us on these kinds of things, right?
Right.
And so I think that we have to be learners just as much as they have to be learners. And I think to think that we had it all figured out because we memorized King James, I think we have to be willing to learn and willing to be wrong, have been wrong at various points in our own dogma. So I think that's, to me, it's been about for my kids to actually put me in a position to be a learner once again, and to actually be willing to say, you know what, while the church has said this for centuries or whatever, maybe I should be rethinking this as well. So I think that's the approach that I've kind of taken, that what, not everything is what I thought it was kind of posture. So I've set myself up to be kind of learning from them as much as they're learning from me.
It's a far more raw and vulnerable place to parent from because it's not ultimate authority. It's more of partnering.
Yeah, there's that co-constructed piece of it where you are giving them agency over even knowing what their own questions are and not giving them answers before they have questions. And I think that's something that we've really, unfortunately, we were given. So I think all of it, just as educators, that whole arc has changed where it was all about the answer. And I think Christians bought into that as well, because it was like, it's sort of like you have to know, what did they say? You have to know the real thing, to recognize the counterfeit or whatever. But there wasn't room for us to have agency around our own learning and find out what our questions are. Right. And I think Tim cautioned me because of his own life. Growing up in I think Christian schools were some of the people that were most respected and that teachers were in awe of were people that behind the scenes were really pretty deceitful and pretty messed up. And yet they ended up having this kind of, they had a moralism and an outward appearance that set everyone at ease. And he just didn't want their journey to end up being a sham. And he didn't want premature commitments or kind of compliance to end up actually limiting their life instead of making it the great, that sort of sacred romance that actually comes together at the right time. I've doubted that a whole bunch of times because it feels really vague and it feels like just letting out the fishing line like so far that you're never sure anything's really catching. I've struggled, I think, because there have been times, you guys, where I feel like I'm the one in the family that has, when you talk about the stuff that they tell you about and you're kind of, there have been times where they've read me things or they're talking to me and I'm sitting in the car thinking like, do you really know who I am and how stretching this is that you're thinking that this is appropriate to be telling me? And I think I felt at times like I'm not known or seen as the believing person that I am, and I felt lost in giving everyone else room to find their way.
Right.
And it's been interesting to have them in the end come back and go, this has cost you a lot to support my exploration, hasn't it? Like I'm seeing where you are in this. I've been helped a little bit by my mom, both of our parents who have not interfered in our own lives where they could at times. And where my mom has said to us, she said, you know what I do? I just make sure that at some point I say, I'm only going to say this once, but I feel like I would be irresponsible not to. Then just kind of lay it out there. Like, this is what I believe about relationship. I feel like I don't need to say it a whole bunch of times because I think they hear it and they know it, but at least I know I've said it. And, that's been a good thing. That's
a challenge for me, Mona, because there's so much truth. I'm so convicted in what I'm saying. And if I'm not seeing them accept that as, oh, right, that's actually mom's right, then I need to say it a few more times so they can really understand how right it is. And that's definitely an area of growth for me.
I realize that you put so much energy into who your kids are going to become and how they're going to turn out over time or whatever, even if you're realistic about it and cool like you guys are and think you're okay people and whatever, but you do that. And then we were singing in church and I was thinking, it's not about them. It's actually about whether all of this holds up for me. It's all about whether they have anything to follow at all that makes sense for me in everything that they're doing and everything that they're becoming. And if my faith can't handle any of this, then what is it that I'm really wanting to compel them to embrace? Because it's fragile and it depends on their behavior. It not only depends on my stuff, but it depends on their stuff for me to even have some sort of serenity or peace. And I'm like, that's too much of a fragile deal. And so like just getting to those points where it's like, no, it's actually about me no matter what. Because I've just seen so many people like they're building up to this crescendo where actually their whole game plan falls apart because of what their kids do. And then it's like the whole thing was a sham. It was all to create this illusion, this thing that made us feel good.
What I think I'm hearing you say is that we pour ourselves into our children's development so much, we lose track of our own. And then we're so invested that when they go off of our track, that we're free falling because we've not maintained our foundation. Noah's teacher she starts the parent meetings now in middle school, and she says, just remember, our children are our paths to enlightenment. No matter what your teenager says to you today, it's your path to enlightenment.
Yeah.
How is empty nesting? How is that going? What are the things about it that you've enjoyed? Since we have so many years, decades, to think about how that will be, what are some of the things, maybe some surprises that that have come along in terms of your own relationship, or you're dealing with the empty nest thing and how that's been?
Awesome.
We're kind of excited about it. Getting Andrew out of the house, we were like, wait, no, Mike is 11.
Wait, yeah,
We have to wait that long.
Just for our audience,
spread them out.
Can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
On the awesome, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, for us, it came on fast and furious, right? I mean, it was like 1 and then 2, 3. I mean, all at the same time. So I don't think we've cried as much as our kids have gone off to university and all of that. I mean, and because we got pregnant 10 days after we got married, right? So we've never not had kids.
Right.
And so, we've had to kind of rethink of who we are as a couple. And, that's why we started this Beautiful Life Summit, and we every year kind of go back and go through our basically our retreat to kind of decide, are we still on track with our beautiful life? And we go through and we set our goals, and we kind of we've reinvented ourselves in so many ways as empty nesters. And I think it's been super hard on several fronts. Obviously, parenting adults is a challenge, no doubt about it. But at the same time, we've kind of both hit our stride in a lot of different ways. So it's been really, really fun.
I feel responsibility for people, and I want to be conscientious. So I think that difference of them being responsible for themselves and being somewhere else just gave me a lot of freedom to just kind of look Tim in the eye and be more fully present. And I was kind of clamoring for my serenity at different times, and I just couldn't find it anywhere, in the house when everyone was there. So that's been really good for me as a person. I think, we went through a real crisis the year that the twins were graduating. I kind of thought this was going to be a big, culminating year. Tim had stepped down from the principalship for the first time in 12 years. It was like we were just going to be parents. We were going to go through this whole thing. And he ended up traveling a lot that year, being gone. And we ended up just in a really precarious place. And it was scary. And then it was the year after, the twins graduated, that we decided to go to Phnom Penh and have what we called our Beautiful Life Summit.
Right.
And that was asking ourselves, what do we want our beautiful life to look like 5 years from now? And even being able to ask that question was very aspirational, So I think the power of that was imagining a life that we both wanted to live, actually listening to the life that the other person found beautiful according to their values and honoring that, because I think you get to a point where you think, okay, what is it that we have in common? What's going to overlap? And I think we gave each other a lot of freedom, and we saw the connections between when you're doing that, when, for instance, you saw the horseback riding time in his life in New Mexico, and now it's motorcycles. But his way of exploring and knowing about and becoming a part of where we are is through that, on a horse, on a motorcycle. And mine is going through junk shops and talking to people in the courtyards of churches and doing all this stuff, but it's the same thing.
It's the same core value.
It's the same core value.
Yeah.
And we're just getting at it in different ways and being able to give each other freedom to go, when you go off and do that, you're getting out of that what I get out of my thing when I do this. So I think that was just really, really powerful. And the other thing that was just briefly a part of that was this 1 hour to your best life exercise, where it's if I had an hour to live, if I had, a month to live, a year to live, 5 years to live, 10 years to live, another life to live, what would I do? And comparing that and unpacking that. And it just gave us this immediacy. And that's why we chose Ethiopia. That's why we moved here. That's why we bought the place in France. That's why, all of these things came out of that exercise. And it's given us a project and a vision for our lives that's been very unifying.
I love that. I think that moving here, we've always done it State of the Union, right? Yeah. Every year, but that's looking back rather than looking rather than looking forward.
One of the things that really impacted us when we were leaving Singapore was going to this counselor's house who had a farewell, and he talked about, this is it. This is the moment, the holy, holy moment that you're in. Mm-hmm. And we just decided at that point, no matter what it looks like where we are, and if we end up with, Giardia and we were under police, what was it? State of emergency when we arrived, and just all that stuff, this is it. This is it, not the next thing. One of the things that really has meant a lot to us was reading a book called The New Parish. And in there, they talk about whether we're living above place or whether we're living in place. Mm-hmm. And I think when you've lived in a variety of places, sometimes you end up kind of feeling temporary where you are, and you can live above the place and commute to your life, or you can live in it. So those are all kind of things that we're processing and figuring out how to do.
One of the reasons we chose to move back to Alaska versus moving to Maui 10, 15 years ago was Maui was too easy, and we wanted our kids to have more grit. Even if it meant shoveling the driveway before school, it created a harder life, and we really wanted that for them. Now we find we need to manufacture hard.
Hard comes in a lot of different ways, wherever we've lived, except for New Mexico, really. And we have house staff, we have a cook, we have cleaners, we have drivers, we live
a stupid life
on so many different levels.
Right.
But, hardship, when you look at it from an educational perspective, just moving from one school to the next is hard, is trauma and traumatic, and it's adversity, and it is hard. So just, saying goodbye to your friends is hard.
Yeah, there was bullying in transition for Tyler and for Mariah. The education was very rigorous. Yeah. Some of the challenge for them came around deciding what mattered, because everyone needed to apply, to 10 of the top elite schools in the world, and that isn't what they felt like they were supposed to do, and differentiating themselves through that, and for us to continue to support values around what success looked like and all that was, that was the struggle. Yeah. Letting them fail.
Yeah, letting them fail. I don't think you have to look very hard anywhere you live to find adversity. And a certain form of adversity is, make your bed and do the dishes. But another form is living with integrity in a place that's made out of plastic. I think that's also hard.
It was little things. Like the crazy thing about Singapore was just the simple thing that their allowance was so low compared to what their friends was, that they had to leave wherever they were and come on the public transportation to get home, because they couldn't afford a cab and still have a night out. And so they had to leave early, which was fine with us. But I mean, those were the kinds of things that I guess were manipulated, but we also couldn't afford more. And it was just how, you ended up working out your values in subtle ways. But I think they would still say there was a lot of artificiality in it, and that they had to really process once they got to university. Yeah.
I so appreciate if hearing, if anything, that is so helpful for me, because I think I have some preconceived ideas about what's difficult, but you're right, just growing up is hard, and trying to live an authentic life, like you said, Tim, in a plastic world it's hard. It's really hard, and that's what they're doing.
The Voyagers podcast is produced by Sugar Sled Productions in Kula on the island of Maui. It's hosted by me, David Glenn Taylor. Maria and I are blessed with many friends who are wonderful parents. And we invite you to spend some time reflecting on your own parenting story, even if you're still in the dreaming phase. We're so grateful for the Stewarts spending some time with us, and we hope to do it again soon. You can follow Dr. Timothy Stewart on Twitter. That's Stuart. And Mona's Instagram is Pure Joy. You can follow her at mmstewart. If you enjoyed what you heard, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. It's really appreciated. You can support the podcast through Patreon by going to VoyagersPodcast.com and clicking on the Patreon link. And if you'd like to sponsor, just email us, david@VoyagersPodcast.com. Next week, we're hanging out with an incredible human being with an amazing story. They call her Vertical Blonde. She's a wife, a mother, a writer, a motivational speaker, and much more. And she does it all without the use of her legs. But don't pity her. She's living her best life and teaching others to do the same. The inspiring Sarah Foley. That's next week on the Voyagers podcast. Mahalo for listening, friends.